Transportation and Mobility Committee of Cleveland City Council to order on this February 5th, 2025. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
McCormick,
Present.
Sly, Bishop. Here. Ray, Casey.
Present.
Morris, Antenna. Present. Mr. Chairman, you have the floor.
All right, and I will bang my gavel to call to order. Madam Clerk, we have a request of excused absence from Council Member Moore. If we could please grant that excused absence. Thank you. Okay. All right. As I said just a few seconds ago, we have two portions of today's hearing. The first one will be a legislative portion. We have the Assistant Director of the Department of Port Control with us this morning, and then we will get an update from our mobility team at the City of Cleveland about the Cleveland Moves mobility plan for the City of Cleveland following the legislative. So we will start with our legislative portion. And Assistant Director, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you, sir?
I'm well. Yourself?
I'm doing great, thank you. All right, let's kick off with ordinance number 1052025 by Council Members McCormick and Griffin by departmental request. Emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of Port Control to exercise the second option to renew lease agreement number CT 3001 LS 2023-010 with Prime Flight Aviation Services, Inc. for the lease of office space at Cleveland Hopkins International Airport to support wheelchair operations, ground handling, and maintenance services. Director 105.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you. This one is to pick up a second option on a lease, existing lease that we have with Prime Flight. They support a number of our airlines for baggage handling, ground service equipment, maintenance, various things. They have a small office space under Concourse C, approximately 500 square feet, and this is requesting authority to enter into that second option term. We are satisfied with them as a tenant, and by all accounts, they provide good service to all of our airline partners. Request approval.
Okay. And the contract amount, was that set in the initial legislation, or is that a market, or how does that get figured out?
So that's based on in our master airline use and lease agreement. There's a formula to determine lease space for all of the terminal spaces, and that is updated on a yearly basis based on that calculation in the lease.
Thank you. Alrighty, and this is year 2 of a 4-year option, is that right?
It'll be year 3 of a 5-year agreement total if we
Got
pick up all the options.
I see, that's right. Okay. Alrighty, what questions do I have on wheelchair operations, ground handling, and maintenance services? Hearing none, ordinance 105-2025 stands approved. Please sign. Alrighty, ordinance 1062025 by Council Members McCormick and Griffin by departmental request. An emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of Port Control to exercise the second option to renew contract number PS 2023-0167 with Recess Creative LLC to provide marketing, promotional, public relations, and advertising services, including materials, equipment, and supplies necessary to promote Cleveland Hopkins International Airport and Berkeley Lakefront Airport for the Department of Port Control.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this piece is another second option term we're requesting authority to enter into. It's an existing contract that we have with Recess Creative. They do provide these marketing and communication type services for us. They administer things on our website, and then they provide support for different events that take place on occasion. If there's a new airline service or if there is any kind of large announcement that we have at the event, this company provides those services to support that and kind of organize events type things like that. And like I said, website and any other ad hoc marketing, communication type services that we need, we utilize through this contract. We are satisfied with their service and seeking to enter into this second option year of the agreement.
Okay, second option to renew on Recess Creative LLC for advertising and promotion. What questions do I have about advertising and promotion? Councilman Brian Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, to the Assistant Director, does the airport have its own marketing department?
We do not have any personnel dedicated to marketing.
Nothing
currently.
in-house to promote the airport.
We do have a vacant position for it, but we do not have anyone currently staffed for that. We have a communications person at the airport, and she's the individual who administers this contract and oversees it. She handles marketing type work, but it is not her designated obligation, not obligation, but responsibility role. But she does handle it along with the services of this contract in her communications role.
And Mr. Chairman, to the Assistant Director, how long has the marketing position been vacant?
Through the chairman to the council person, I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I'd have to get back to you on that.
And then one last question, Mr. Chairman, the Assistant Director, how much is this contract worth?
I believe through the chair to the council person, the cap is approximately 1.1 million, I believe. And however, it is not the large portion of this contract. We also utilize this contract for air service incentive. So the airport cannot directly incentivize air service. However, it is allowable under FAA regulations to incentivize air service through marketing efforts. And so I'll give you an example. Aer Lingus a few years ago, there was the agreement where the state and other county, state and other entities incentivized Aer Lingus to bring service to Cleveland. The airport's contribution to that was direct marketing services. And so we utilize this contract for those marketing services. So while, yes, the 1.1 million seems like a large number for, marketing and other services like that, again, a large portion of that goes towards those incentive programs to promote air service for the airport.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. And do we know where Recess Creative is located? Just, I'm curious. I'll probably find out here.
Have that. Their office is located at.
Oh, in Cleveland. Okay. Yeah, okay. So they're a city business. I looked it up. So
Thank you.
that's good. We always love a city business. Okay. Additional questions on 106-2025? Hearing none, 106-2025 stands approved. Please sign. Ordinance number 107-2025 by council members McCormick and Griffin by departmental request. An emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of Port Control to enter into a triple net lease agreement with Prime Flight Aviation Services, Inc. to lease certain space located at building number 208 and 5851 Cargo Road at Cleveland Hopkins International Airport for office and storage space to support aviation ground handling operations and ground service equipment maintenance for various airlines at the airport for a term of 1 year with 4 one-year options to renew exercisable by the director.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this one is a new lease that we're looking to enter into. It is also with Prime Flight, the same company we talked to a few pieces ago. The other piece was for some office space in the concourse. This particular space that Prime Flight is looking to lease is more of a garage, office, maintenance type facility that's not on the secured area. It is down in the South Campus area of the airport. Recently, the airlines, it is at their discretion who they use for ground handling services and for ground handling service equipment maintenance and all these support type services. Recently, there was some change in who the airlines were using. Prime Flight picked up some additional airlines to provide these services to, and so we're looking to lease them this space so they have enhanced capabilities for these maintenance type services to handle some of the equipment that the airlines use. The space that we're talking about here, this building, will be vacated soon by a former company that did these services for the airlines, and then we're looking to put Prime Flight into this space to support the airline operations. Again, as I mentioned in the last piece, we're satisfied with Prime Flight as a tenant, and we're looking forward to them increasing their footprint and their services for the airlines at the airport.
Thank you. So this is a 5-year proposal. So 2 questions on that. One, have you incorporated this into your thought process around the TMDP? Second question, how do you determine rent for this location?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we have taken into account for the TMDP, Terminal Modernization Development Program. This building, again, is on the south campus area, so it doesn't have any direct impact to what we're planning to do in the terminal area. And this particular lease, as is all of our leases that are outside of the terminal, is determined by a third-party appraisal. We have not completed that appraisal yet, but that will determine the rate in which we charge for this lease.
Okay. Do you have any questions on 107-2025? Councilman Bishop.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So if you haven't done, through the chair, if you haven't determined the rate yet, so is this piece of legislation, is it too early to have this piece of legislation if you don't know the dollar amount yet? I guess that's my question.
Through the chair to the councilperson, we are proceeding with this as we do all the leases. We can happily share that lease rate with you when we do have it. But right now, we're seeking approval to enter into this and kind of continue our standard procedure of just utilizing the rate in which is determined through this appraisal.
Okay. And through the chair, the 4 year is 4 year, 1 year, four 1 year options to renew. Do they need legislative authority to renew those 4 years or?
No, via the legislation, they do not.
Okay.
It's by
All
the
right.
director.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. If we could get, I don't know, who's on staff? Morning. Didn't see there for a second. If we could get that rate, if you could follow up with our staff on whatever that rate is set after the fact, please.
No problem.
Thank you. Any additional questions on 107? Hearing none, 107-2025 stands approved. Please sign. Ordinance 112-2025 by council members McCormick and Griffin by departmental request. An emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of Port Control to enter into an amendment to LS 2024-0021 with Aircraft Services International, Inc., DBA Menzies Aviation, to add a provision for the location of and repair of disabled vehicles. 112.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board or committee, we have an existing agreement with Menzies Aviation. What they do at the airport is provide fueling services for the airline. These are the folks that are actually fueling the aircraft on the airfield. We have a lease agreement with them for space, and then the airlines themselves hire this company directly to do the fueling services for the aircraft. What we're doing here with this piece of legislation is we're more clearly defining the allowed operations of the company on the airfield, right? So we want to clearly define in their agreement where they can and cannot perform maintenance type services. I don't think it was completely clear in the original agreement where they could and could not perform these heavy maintenance type services. So what this piece of legislation is doing is clarifying that and making it very clear for us and them where that type of work can take place.
Okay. Okay, what questions do I have on an amendment to Menzies Aviation currently operating at the airport? Hearing none, ordinance 112-2025 stands approved. Please sign. Ordinance number 121-2025 by council members McCormick and Griffin by departmental request, an emergency ordinance to amend the title of sections 1, 4, and 5 of ordinance number 1365-2023, passed December 4th, 2023, and to supplement the ordinance by adding a new section 4A relating to the fiscal year 24 and 25 airport capital improvement plan. Director.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, back in 23, was our typical practice is we come before this body either every year or every 2 years or so, and we present a handful of projects to the body that we're looking to enter into grant agreements for with the FAA via our 5-year capital improvement plan that we agree with on with our FAA partners. We came before the body, I believe it was 2023. For the handful of projects that were proposed at that time for grants. Since that time, that list of projects has changed through our discussions with the FAA. They give us their feedback on, hey, we think you should do this project in this fiscal year and that project in that fiscal year. Through those ongoing discussions with the FAA, they have recommended that we move forward a few of the projects that weren't originally in the legislation to move forward with grants. And so that's what we're presenting here, is to amend that legislation to add these two projects so we can move forward with projects to receive these FAA grants. The two projects in particular are a taxiway Victor, which is over on the west side of the airfield. It's an extension to that. And what this does is facilitating corporate hangar development over on the west side. The taxiway extension will make it more accessible to do development over on the west side of the field. The other piece is reconstruction of our wildlife fence. This is a project to reconstruct the entire fence around the airport. To bring it up to
That's why it's $30 million.
Yes, it is. We have a lot of fence, approximately 10 miles or so of fence around the airport, and this is a project that we're moving forward with our FAA partners to receive grant funding to reconstruct that entire wildlife fence around the airport. And so we're really excited about that project too. So again, this piece is adding these projects to the capital improvement program to be able to move forward with the projects and go forward with the grants with the FAA.
Thank you, sir. So do for these two, the taxiway extension and the fence, is there a local match? Does the FAA pay for the whole thing? What does that look like?
These will be 75-25 splits, so the FAA will be covering 75% of the grant, and there'll be a local match of 25%.
Thank you, sir. And the local match, is that paid for by the same formula by the airlines?
It
pays for that?
is typically paid out of what's called our airport discretionary funds, which is part of our master lease with the airlines. They give us a set amount of discretionary funds every year through that lease that we have with them, and we utilize those discretionary funds to cover local matches every
Okay.
year.
So yes, the airlines are paying for this.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so 25% of this contract is coming from our local airline fund, 75% from the feds. We have a total here of, is the total price tag the 29,673? Does that
Mr.
include-
Chairman, that's correct, yeah.
Okay, so that includes both the runway and the fence. Fences are so damn expensive. They are just, I don't know, whoever is doing fences is living wild.
Well, and Mr. Chairman, ours
And I know
is...
just
ours is-
residential fences are expensive. I mean, just
Yeah, ours has some specialties to it. You know, it has
Okay.
certain things to prevent wildlife from going under, and
So you don't have like a 4-foot decorative, city planning's back there, so make sure that, they don't need a variance for your fence over there.
yeah.
They're listening back there. Okay, so we've got an amendment to the capital improvement plan to include redoing the fencing around the airport as well as an extension of taxiway, drainage, lighting, grading, to allow for additional development in that portion of the airport. What questions do I have on this piece?
Mr. Chairman.
Councilman, did you want to go, or you're pointing him? Councilman Casey.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, to the Assistant Director, how much discretionary funds does the airport have?
I don't know, like it is constant. It's a changing number, but what is laid out in our master use and lease agreement with the airlines is they provide $12 million per year via that lease agreement that we have with them.
All right, so we get $12 million a year in discretionary funds.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. And then the second thing, Mr. Chairman, to the Assistant Director, is I did have a conversation with the Director, and that's regarding the master plan. And I don't know if this was thought of when the master plan was actually developed, but we would really encourage the airport to seriously consider and look into having adult disability changing stations throughout the airport. It's one thing to have just a changing station, which most people have in their bathrooms, in a public place. But to have an adult one makes a world of difference, especially when individuals with disabilities are flying. They're not able to use, the restrooms on the planes for whatever reason. And I get that, but once they get off the plane, something should be available to them. And I did have a conversation with the director about that, even if nothing else, putting a temporary one in as we vie for the Special Olympics. It's one of the things that the rival city that's also competing has that we don't. So in regards to the master plan, I really hope that that becomes a permanent fixture within the airport. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Director, could you respond to that?
Sure. Through the chair to the councilperson, absolutely 100% agree. In the master plan, there absolutely will be adult changing stations. I think we're still a few years out from any of that, though. So in the meantime, we have identified one bathroom that we are adding an adult changing station, and we are analyzing all of the other spaces. We have looked to do it we know some of the spaces of existing bathrooms that we have, they are a bit too constricted, and the table itself just does not fit in the space. But we've identified one location, and we're working to identify other locations where we can add some additional changing tables now this year as soon as possible, so we can obviously accommodate those passengers and customers.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. As follow up on that, having changed many adult diapers in my life, is that a independent, standalone stall facility? I mean, what is that? It's very different to change an adult diaper than it is to change a
Right,
child's
yeah,
diaper.
Mr. Chairman, the one location we have identified will be a family restroom, and it designated a family restroom, so it's a single unit.
Good. Okay.
Where door can be locked,
Okay,
privacy, all
great.
of that. Yep.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Odie Martins, if we also, when do we have tentatively scheduled the update for the TMDP? April? So we're looking at an April Councilman update for this committee to hear more about where they are with the TMDP and kind of what next steps are and things like that. So we will have them at committee to discuss that. But really great feedback, thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions on 121-2025? Hearing none, 121-25 stands approved. Please sign. Okay, I think we're done with you, sir.
Thank you.
You are welcome to stay, but we know you're a busy person, so, all right. All right, so that concludes the legislative portion of the Transportation Mobility Committee. We will now bring up the team who is here to tell us more about Cleveland Moves. I know we have friends from Bike Cleveland here. The committee welcomes you to sit at the table. It's up to you. You want to make a public comment? Yes. Yes, I'm right here. You sign in with the clerk, and then we'll get you up. I just want to make sure everyone follows the same rules. City planning, come on up. Your city staff, you're welcome. All right. We're going to take Bike Cleveland's public comment to start. Unless you want to go after the presentation. Okay, it's up to you. Before or after? Okay, great. Okay, good morning. Kelly, please introduce your team and yourself and kick us off.
Good morning. To the committee through the chair, my name is Callie Mersman. I'm the Senior Strategist for Transit and Mobility in Mayor Bibb's office. I'm joined this morning by Adam Davenport, Manager of the Neighborhood Planning Section in the City Planning Commission, and Sarah Davis, our Active Transportation Senior Planner in City Planning. And we're here today to give an informational presentation about Cleveland Moves, which is our 5-year multimodal transportation plan. We're in the draft stage right now, so we're really glad to be talking with you at a time when we have plan recommendations pulled together, but they're not yet final. So your input and that of your constituents is especially important at this stage. A little bit of background about how we got to this point here. As some of you may be familiar, the city's last citywide bikeway master plan was adopted in 2007 as part of the citywide comprehensive planning process at that time. In about 2014, led by the Office of Sustainability, the city aligned some recommendations from that 2007 plan with our capital roadway plan. And so at that time, and basically from that time over the last 10 years, we've really been adding bicycle lanes and facilities in an opportunistic way. So when we have a major capital investment on a roadway, we'll see if bike lanes are appropriate on that street and install them as part of that project. In 2022 and 23, we worked with many of you at this table on an update to our Complete and Green Streets Ordinance, which actually requires the city to adopt a plan like this, like Cleveland Moves, every 5 years. So this plan is the first cycle of that requirement in that ordinance and is a manifestation of our goals and really the need and priority around complete, safe streets that work for people, whether they're walking, biking, rolling in a wheelchair, or driving their car. This plan is especially important because, again, as I shared before, we have been implementing safety and mobility improvements as possible through capital projects, but we know that there's a lot of need and demand out there, as we've seen with some of our traffic calming work, with safety work through Vision Zero, as well as multimodal improvements. And all of those are mutually reinforcing and help to make our streets work for everyone. So this strategy and plan allows us to be more proactive and strategic about making the most of our investments and making investments where they're needed through quick build, rapid implementation strategies, rather than requiring multi-million-dollar investments through capital projects that can take years to plan, design, fund, and build. So as I said, this is an informational presentation. We are really looking forward to your input to help make this plan the best it can be to reflect the realities and needs of your neighborhood as much as possible. And then over the next 3 to 5 years, we really are looking forward to working with council members to implement priority improvements in your wards. So thank you for having us here this morning. Sarah Davis is going to take it away from here and we'll share all of the details of the plan.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. You've got the floor.
Okay. Good morning. I am Sarah Davis. I'm our Active Transportation Senior Planner. I'm coming here. I've been in Cleveland now for about a year and a half. I moved here from the city of Boston, where I used to work for the city and help implement safe street designs across the city, especially the quick build that Callie mentioned. We've been working on this plan for the last almost year, and really working to address a really big issue in our city. The biggest thing I want to highlight as we head into this is that we had 75 fatalities due to traffic
Oh,
crashes.
sorry, pull the mic closer to you.
Thank you.
So we've got folks here in the room, but also we've got a viewing audience, so our mics are a little
Awesome.
finicky. So yeah, pull it real close to you.
So we had 75 fatalities due to traffic crashes in 2024, which is a significant increase from the year before. This isn't concentrated in one area. This is all across the city. And we've done work to highlight those. We adopted a Vision Zero, which is the idea of eliminating fatal and serious injury crashes on our streets in 2022. But since then, we've only seen those increase, so we have a lot of work to do to address that. This plan will work to address that, but it will also serve as an update to our Safe Routes to School plan, so we'll be able to make sure we're prioritizing children and folks getting to their schools every day. And we've really prioritized working with our youth to hear what their needs are. And this also has been part of a collaboration with a national organization called CityThread, which is helping us to set an ambitious goal to build out change over 3 years. So that said, the big vision for this plan is that Clevelanders deserve safe streets. We've been hearing from people across the city. People are scared when they're driving, they're scared when they're walking, they're scared to cross the street. They have thought about riding a bicycle, but maybe don't want to do so. And people, in every neighborhood that I talk to are really exhausted by this. So we had a few goals that we set out with this plan, and it was not just about safety, but also about comfort. So I know we have a lot of striped bike lanes on the street, but a lot of people will say, I don't feel comfortable riding in that. Maybe I would ride a bicycle or I would let my kids ride a bicycle, but not with just a stripe separating them between a car and a bike. We've also been thinking a lot about convenience, and it's really easy to drive a car in a lot of parts in Cleveland, but it is a harder choice to do other things. People don't always have the choice too, so that's something that we've really been thinking about. And then also really centering the community, so working hard to touch all different types of Clevelanders in this work and have these really in-depth conversations with them. So you can see a photo here from our youth-focused community conversation last fall. We'll actually be meeting with them again this afternoon to share our recommendations with them and hear their feedback. As far as where we are in the process, we started engagement last summer. We brought our consultant on last spring. We also worked on data analysis at that time. So looking at, what's stressful right now, what could we change, where are the key spots. I should highlight that we already looked at our high crash corridors when we did our Vision Zero plan, so we've been updating that. When I say high crash corridor, I mean a 1 mile segment where 10 or more people have been killed or seriously injured within 5 years. So that's really significant. That's a lot of people impacted on streets, and we have quite a few segments across the city. We started drafting our recommendations in the fall and started hearing from our focus groups and in our community conversations throughout the end of the year and continuing through now. And we've put this up online now to hear feedback, and we're working to finalize the recommendations so this can be adopted by City Planning Commission this spring. And the idea is that we'll shift right into implementation. The need is urgent. We need to start making change now, and so really shifting into implementation this year and continuing until we do that plan update in 2030. As far as what engagement has looked like, we've done all different kinds of things. We've done in-person, really focusing on meeting people where they are as opposed to having big meetings and asking people to come during their evening. I know most of us want to go home at the end of the day and see kids or family and eat dinner. So we were at a lot of different events just trying to catch people where they already were, in addition to those focus groups that I've mentioned. We had some online opportunities for engagement, and we had some standing information available on our website throughout the whole process. As far as engagement events, I know this map has a lot going on, but there's a few pieces. So the first is those red lines that you see. Those are those high crash corridors that I mentioned. And some of these, shift a little bit year over year, but we see some of these pop up pretty consistently. So St. Clair, Superior, East 55th, Denison, Lorraine, those are all streets that we're seeing pretty consistently. The yellow dots are where we had events, and just because those are the places where we had events, it doesn't mean that we haven't heard from other areas of the city. I looked at the zip codes of who we heard from both in person and online, and we've heard from every single zip code in the city. And then the blue that you see here, that's what the Ohio Department of Transportation has classified as high need. In comparison to the state, all of Cleveland is high need. That said, we know that we have limited resources and we have to prioritize, so we looked at the highest need in Cleveland, and that's what's highlighted here. High need includes poverty, access to a vehicle, number of youth, number of seniors, education levels, and it helps us to be in line with how ODOT is providing funding, and it's one of their mechanisms that they use. I wanted to highlight this, so we compared who we were hearing from in person versus who we were hearing from online. We had an optional section for folks in person to fill out about what their demographics were. As you can see here, the in-person engagement really closely reflected the demographics of the city of Cleveland in terms of race. Alternatively, online, we heard almost entirely from white folks across the city, so 85% of that online feedback. So that's why we were really highlighting the importance of this in-person engagement. In terms of what that in-person engagement looked like, we asked folks to fill out this story card here. So this asked people how they typically get around, how they wish they could get around, what are some of the biggest barriers, a scariest or most dangerous street for transportation in their neighborhood. I would highlight on this one, we heard the top 2 modes that people wanted to use to get around were walking and then biking, and then we had a few responses that were walking and biking combined. And then we also played a game called Myth or Truth, which was meant to share information about transportation. There's been a lot of advances and research around what makes streets safer, especially as fatalities and crashes across the country rose, starting with the pandemic. And so we played Truth or Myth. We would read a statement and ask people to weigh in what they thought about it. We had some really good conversations around this. One of them was focused, many conversations, but I'll highlight 2. We had a lot of conversations about roundabouts. People were like, what the heck's up with these roundabouts? They're kind of confusing, and we had a lot of good conversations highlighting how, even though it's a little bit confusing, if everyone's going slower and, even if that guy yields when they're not supposed to, it's a safer alternative to a T-bone crash where someone ends up fatally injured. And so people were kind of like, even though it's a little annoying, I'll tolerate the annoyance if I can make sure my neighbors are safe when we're driving. The other conversation that I would highlight from this was we talked about how bike lanes benefit everyone and not just the people that are riding bicycles. Research shows us that when we put in especially separated bike lanes, it has a narrowing effect on the road. It leads to slower, therefore safer speeds on our streets. And people were like, I don't know if I'd ride a bicycle, but I'm interested in my street feeling safer. And I have a quote that I'll share from one of our focus groups actually about that. So these were really, really cool ways to have conversations with people, and people just generally seem like they're going fast, they're not paying attention. It's really scary to get around no matter how I'm moving. This is the quote that I wanted to highlight. So this was someone who, she doesn't see herself as a bike rider, but she really understood, like, people are passing me in the bike lane. I don't want them to do that if there's some kind of physical separation there that physically stops a driver from doing so. As far as themes from what we heard during our community engagement, we heard a lot of want for more protected and high comfort infrastructure, so highlighting separated bike lanes, but there's many more pieces that go into that. Just the condition and the maintenance of our infrastructure that we do have, so maybe not asking for the fanciest things, but making sure when we put things in, we do them well and we keep up with the maintenance. People really said high praise for the speed tables universally across the city, and we also heard about street lighting. I know this slide has a lot of text on it, but this is just showing our metrics that we're planning to use to track our success. So as we continue to make changes to the streets across the city, we want to make sure that we're reaching goals. So a couple high-level goals that we have are the number of folks that live within a 5-minute walk of a high-comfort bike facility. So rather than having to drive to a trail or a park, being able to leave your house, maybe walk a couple minutes with your bicycle with your kids, and hop on a trail or a separated bike lane or a neighborhood greenway. Also looking at the number of crashes, especially looking at people that are walking, rolling, or riding a bicycle involved in crashes, because we know that those are more likely to be fatal crashes. And thinking about the number of high-stress crossings across the city of Cleveland. So I have a couple data points here. I mentioned at the beginning we had 75 fatalities due to crashes in 2024, so still seeing that number rise. We also looked at how many people are living near our existing bikeways. The big thing I want to call out here is you see all ages and abilities. So that's what I mean when I say high comfort. This means, maybe your 3-year-old isn't riding a bicycle on these by themselves, but, most people that would feel safe riding on this, whether it's a quiet neighborhood street, whether it's a separated bike lane. That is the infrastructure we're striving to build. This is not for the spandex-clad bicyclists can ride in them, but this is for regular people who might not call themselves a bicyclist. And so we have about 60 miles of that across the city, and that's mostly trails. That is only about a 5-minute walk from around 5% of the Cleveland population, depending on whether you're in a high need or, the general vicinity of Cleveland. So that's a lot of people that don't live close, even though we have some really great infrastructure as is. And then you can also see here our pedestrian crossings. So looking at the high-stress crossings, this for me as a new-ish Clevelander was really affirming. I feel like when I came downtown for the first time, every single crossing I was like, whoa, there's a lot of lanes. I feel like people are turning left into me. There's a lot going on here. And it was a big shift from what I was used to. So you can see downtown is lit up red. So when we say high-stress crossings, that's looking at the number of lanes, that's looking at the speed limit, the vehicle volumes, whether or not there's a refuge island in the middle for someone to pause in if there's a turner that's not going to stop for them, and whether that crossing is located mid-block, so thinking about those crossings over by the convention center on Lakeside, that you're crossing 6 lanes and you just have the RFBs, versus at a signalized intersection where you have the walk sign for you. So it's about 15% of crossings across the city. Shifting from our data analysis into our recommendations, we have 2 different types. So one is network, and that's our bike network. However, recognizing that we know data shows us that when we put in improvements that make it safer to ride a bicycle, not only is it safer to ride a bicycle, it's also safer to drive, it's also safer to walk, it's also safer to be on the bus. So just slowing speeds down on all of those streets and being able to add in these other approaches. And then we have systemic approaches and practices where this is, not location specific, but we can say we're going to target this in our high crash corridors and high pedestrian areas first, and then we'll move on from there. As far as systemic practices, they include all different pieces. So how our signals work, what our crosswalks look and feel like, how we're upgrading our bike lanes. If you haven't heard of a road diet, thinking about narrowing our roadways to slow speeds and make them safer. And then other practices as simple as, thinking about street lighting and how it affects visibility. We see a lot more crashes, especially like after the time change happens in the fall and it gets darker earlier. So highlighting a few of those, one of the ones that doesn't seem like it would have a big impact, but I've personally experienced and seen a lot of change from is just shorter cycles. Sometimes in Cleveland, it feels like you got to a light and you're like, I'm the only person here. We're waiting for the light to turn green, and it feels like it takes a long time to turn over. And that's whether you're in a car, whether you're on a bike, whether you're walking. So we can oftentimes maintain the right amount of time for people walking across the street, but shorten down the total length it takes to go through the cycle. And that makes it less likely for a person walking to go when it says don't walk and then potentially be hit by a car. So it has, the patient's impact on people who are driving, but also for people who are walking. You might notice this at the signal out front of City Hall if you're crossing there. It goes a little bit faster than it used to. We can also use leading pedestrian intervals, and you can see that in the picture. A lot of our green lights turn at the same time as the walk sign comes on, so if there's right turners and they're ready to go, you don't have a chance to step off the curb before they start turning, right? So this gives people who are walking a 2 to 10 second head start to step into the street, and then the driver has to yield to them. So these are little changes. They don't seem big, they're not flashy, but they make a big difference in how you're experiencing the street and how everyone sees each other and can see things. As far as pedestrian crossings go, we can do things as simple as high visibility crosswalks. So as opposed to just having one stripe on each side, having a ladder style crosswalk. We do have to be strategic about this. We don't have unlimited maintenance ability and budget, but we want to prioritize our mid-block crossings, crosswalks in your schools, crosswalks on high crash corridors, things like that for these upgrades. You can see a picture here from Mayfield of a curb extension. This is called a pin-on curb extension. We can have them attached to the curb. We can, build them with flex posts. There's many different options, but curb extensions basically reduce the amount of time someone crossing is in the street. So in this situation, we would do a pin-on because we don't have to adjust drainage. So it's saving the time and the money that it takes to re-engineer all that drainage and allows us to make changes quicker. And I'll also highlight daylighting. So on the bottom, you can see our clear corners. Some places where we have parking, people will park all the way up to the crosswalk. Then when you go to cross the street, you're kind of like peering out from behind the cars, like, can I see? Is anyone coming? The drivers can't see you if there's a car in the way. So by reducing that parking in front of crosswalks and just physically hardening that using plastic delineators, things like that, we're increasing the sight lines of everyone. So, no one crossing the street is trying to step out in front of that car. No one is trying to hit a pedestrian in most cases, but making sure that they can see one another and so that they are more likely to yield. As far as bike infrastructure upgrades, just a couple here. So I've been talking about separated bike lanes this whole time. We do have that one on Lorraine that you can see in the top right. So having something physical where people can't just drive into that space, slowing down those speeds and making it feel safer. We know data also shows us that people are more likely to ride a bicycle if they feel safe on it. And polling in Cleveland shows us that people are more really interested in riding bike if there's more separated infrastructure. We also can look at things like bike boxes, which you see in the left picture. So that kind of gives people, when they're riding their bike, a place to stop at the front of the line. That way traffic sees them when the light turns green, and it reduces that situation where a driver pulls across the crosswalk and the crosswalk is blocked. So again, these benefits are not just for a person riding a bicycle, they're also for the person in the wheelchair or the stroller crossing who, has to go around the truck in the crosswalk or can't get onto the curb ramp because there's a truck in the way. And highlighting a couple more here, centerline hardening you see in that bottom left picture, that's at 156 and Waterloo. And that's just putting something to harden the left turns of folks as they're turning off of a street. This slows the speeds down, and then if there is a person walking and they haven't had a chance to see that when they're trying to judge the turn, they're going slower, they're not crossing across the wrong way lane, so that's also proven to reduce crashes. And then you can see the mini roundabouts on Franklin Boulevard in the right picture. We've had a lot of success for that. Even when people drive straight over them, it still is serving as essentially a speed table. So still successful in that way. And again, just when we have slower speeds, crashes are less severe, people are less likely to die, and that's really, really important. We want our neighbors to stay alive. Getting a little bit deeper into the bike network recommendations, we're really focusing on high comfort facilities. So I know we have Sharrows on West 25th that most people would never ride in the street on. You can see the people biking on the sidewalk. Oh, that's impressive. Yeah, I haven't been that bold yet. We have some buffered bike lanes, including on Superior, downtown. And then for this plan, we're really focusing on things, starting with the neighborhood greenway, so all the ones highlighted in green on the right. So a neighborhood greenway, it's a low volume, traffic calm neighborhood street with signage to help people get around, separated bike lanes, shared use paths. Acknowledging here that shared use paths and off-street trails, those cost a lot more and take a lot more time, so we can do much more when we build things in the existing street. Context is really important when we talk about level of comfort. So we have a map published on our project webpage that calls out the level of traffic stress on each street in Cleveland, so you can feel free to hop on, zoom in on the streets that you're thinking about. But that takes into account what the speed limit are, how many cars are driving on that street, if there's parking, so are you dodging doors from one side of people getting out of their cars and drivers on the other side. And getting into our network here, so I mentioned those approximately 60 miles of all ages and abilities. This is what that looks like now. So it's mostly trails, and not a lot of people can get to those from their house quickly. This is the beginning of our draft network. So we know that we can make a big difference in the next 3 years, and we're looking to set an ambitious goal for what we can build out. So this is just the draft stages of thinking about what the next 3 years could look like here in green. And then this is what's published online right now for public comment. So this is highlighting neighborhood greenways in green, separated bike lanes in blue. We have the West 25th bus bike lane there in red. So you can log on, you can see what other people are saying, you can add your comments, you can encourage your constituents to add comments to this, but we expect that this network will be over 250 miles of high comfort bikeways across the city, with the goal being that every Cleveland household is within a 5-minute walk of a high comfort, all ages and abilities bike facility. So as far as the second round of community engagement, we've held many of our second rounds of focus groups. We have one today, I have another one to go to on Friday. We are open to doing additional engagement, so if you're looking to collaborate, to do more, I'm happy to work with you on that. And we'd love if you could share our webpage. I'm happy to send you the link to my e-blast with constituents as well. And I'm happy to meet one-on-one with any of you. You can schedule a meeting with me on the website, or we can work to set up something longer, or you can send me an email, whatever works best. We have the online feedback map published for the next week and a half. Again, really prioritizing that feedback that we've heard in person, knowing that it's much more representative of what Cleveland looks like. You can find online, I know it says we will share, but we have shared an explanation of all the systemic practices with examples of where we would be looking to install them. And we have just like a glossary. We found that this isn't common in Northeast Ohio. There's a lot to learn, and so we have some just informational content available there as well. So if people are like, what the heck is a curb extension, we have that available for them. And as far as the next 3 years, we're looking at adding protection to existing wide bike lanes. So not every bike lane is wide enough to add separation to, but some of them and many of them are. On some streets, it might look like restriping, so removing the existing striping, adding new striping so we can have separated bike lanes on those streets. And that's really quick build. So we're not repaving the street in most situations. We're not rebuilding all of the curbs. It's meant to be, we're changing the street quickly, cheaply, and impacting the safety of our residents. Installing neighborhood greenways will include signage, markings on the street, and speed tables strategically to make sure that if there are streets where we're seeing more speeding on those routes or too many vehicles, that we can slow those down. And then we're also looking to modify signal timing in 5 zones or corridors, depending on what you're looking at, a year. So starting with this year, we would definitely include downtown in that, but then looking to, consider other places outside of downtown as well. And then how can you support us? So a couple of things. I mentioned City Thread, the national organization that we've been working with to rapidly implement safety improvements. So we're working with them to set and meet an ambitious 3-year goal. We're also working to get our work for 2025, or continue our work for 2025 underway. That will look mostly like upgrading our existing bike lanes because we know we can do that quickly and in-house. It will also look like adding neighborhood greenways, another thing that we can do quickly and mostly in-house. And some projects that are already ongoing and already, are set to be installed this year. And we also need to do some behind-the-scenes work. So if we want to do quick build projects next year, that means we need to spend time and money designing them in 2025. We know that council discretionary funds can really amplify this progress. So thinking about, I showed what we could potentially do in 3 years, but we could have a whole network of neighborhood greenways built out if that's something that you're interested in, supporting us in doing. Or if you're like, we have a lot of wide crossings where there's a center turn lane. Those are great locations where we can prioritize pedestrian refuge islands, so having that place for people to pause in the middle of the street so they're only looking at crossing one direction of traffic at a time. So there's lots of different ways where you can be impactful in this, and we're happy to work with you to figure out what those can be. And I think that's all for me.
Thank you very much for that thorough presentation. Mr. Davenport, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Not this time.
Are you sure?
Yes.
So you oversee our neighborhood planning managers. What do you think about this plan?
This is a.
With a microphone, sir. Because your role and your folks on your team are important, so I'd like to hear your feedback.
Love that. This plan is the first one since 2007. I think this is a pretty big deal and a first step. I think that we've made strides, most importantly, with our capital projects office over the last 3 years in this coordination effort, and I think it's really displaying throughout this presentation, right? That's like stuff with the roundabout project for sure, and getting through projects like Superior and Lorraine Midways, right? This big stuff that Sarah was kind of alluding to that we want to shift away from in some shape and form because we have more impactful, more impact with a lower dollar amount around our city neighborhoods, right? Like we know the price of speed tables for in-house work, right? $2,800 a pop. On the private market, it's $8,000. Like we can do this quick, effective, and around every neighborhood quicker. Or faster as well. The other component to this is zooming out with the folks in the capital projects office and saying, hey, what else are we doing? And then what else is the county doing? What's our plan to take this to the next level kind of thing?
Okay.
So we're really happy about it.
All right, thank you. Madam Clerk, I've got one person signed up for public comment. Any additional folks here for public comment signed up? Okay. Okay, Jenna Thomas from Bike Cleveland, come on up. You can sit right here. From Ward 16, my apologies. Ward 16.
Resident. Great. Thank you so much for letting me
And you've
give
got
some
3
comment
minutes.
Here.
Thanks.
Okay. So, I think people often think about people that are biking and walking in our city as, they're wearing the cycling gear, they're riding $3,000 bikes, they're riding for exercise or recreation. And I really encourage you to look around and see the people, the constituents that you have in your ward riding bikes. It's people using bikes for transportation. And I think, as owning a car gets more and more unaffordable, and, families are sharing cars, like, I really see this plan as offering dignity to people that don't have a car, can't afford a car, and are walking and biking and taking transit in Cleveland. Last night we had a conversation with the directors of advocacy for Bike Pittsburgh and Bike Walk Kansas City, and we asked them like, why is it that you guys are able to, install these protected bike lanes, make these big changes on your roadways? And they said one of the big things is that they have champions on City Council really pushing these things through, supporting those projects. So I think you guys can really help make this plan a success. I would be lying if I said I wasn't worried about ensuring that this implementation was rapid, and I think everyone here is like, we want to figure out the way to do this, that this plan doesn't collect dust on a shelf or take years and years and years to implement. And I think your partnership can really help make it a success. So yeah, we're really excited about this plan. We love that we're actually talking about protected bike lanes. We have so much right of way in the city that we can offer to not just people in cars. So yeah, shout out to these folks for making such, and we love the community engagement that happened for a long time. I think it's been a lot of like Bike Cleveland people talking about these things, but like I think this plan has really shown that it's a consensus across the city that people are tired of the speeding and tired of the way our streets look. And it's so thanks.
Thank you so much for your comments. Okay. All right. Well, again, I really appreciate this presentation. I'll lead with a few questions, and then I've got Slife Casey Santana. Anyone else that wants to say anything, you're welcome to. We'll open it up to everybody. Okay. So once again, thank you. I really appreciate all the hard work that's gone into this process, and I will reflect Jenna's comments that I'm looking forward to the implementation of this, and I'll say that, just as a point of personal privilege, prior to Mayor Bibb coming on and Ms. Mersman being promoted, this was not a priority of the city of Cleveland. It was not. I'm going to be very clear about that. We have been talking about street calming and road calming for many, many, many years. It is now a priority, and I appreciate your leadership, Ms. Mersman and the mayor, making this a priority. But some of us have been talking about this for a long time, to deaf ears, from my perspective. So I say that to say that I'm very happy that we are here today. I'm sure you'll hear feedback from my colleagues. I cannot go to a community meeting without hearing about speeding cars. Not one community meeting where I don't hear about speeding cars. Every single block club, every single neighborhood, I get complaints about speeding cars, just religiously. I mean, it is such a problem in our community, and I know it's not just Cleveland, it's across the country, but people have forgotten how to drive. People are acting a fool all over the city, and so I have lost all patience and faith that people are going to learn how to drive. So as a city, I embrace this approach of saying we have to design our roads that force people to be safer driving, biking, walking, using a wheelchair, whatever it might be. They don't listen to the signs. They don't listen to the paint. Parking all over the place, driving all over the place, speeding through intersections. Beeping does not allow you to drive through a red light. That is not legal. If I can, say that to everybody that's listening. So I say all that to say this is a lived experience of the folks that live in the city of Cleveland. It is a lived experience on an everyday basis. I'm a lifelong city resident. I will die in the city of Cleveland. We see this every day. You don't have to run this. I mean, I'm glad we did this. This is really helpful. But the study of the lived experience of the residents of the city of Cleveland will tell you how big of a problem this is. So really excited that we're here today. So my first request would be, can you please share this presentation as well as all the links you discussed in your contact information with our staff. Ms. Odie Martins is right over here. She is our lead research staff person for transportation mobility at the Cleveland City Council. So if you could please make sure you get that to her and she'll share it with us. So kind of a bigger picture question before I dive into some specifics. Have we looked at what, if any, legislative changes will be needed to implement this plan?
To the council through the chair, if I could expand that to be just council authority. We will likely be coming back to council for permission and authority to contract professional services contracts around design services, especially for bicycle facilities. We also, to Mr. Davenport's point, have been working very closely with capital projects and requirements contracts that they already have in place for quicker construction to amplify our existing city staff, as well as some design services that they already have on retainer. So we, in sort of the internal process, parallel to the external process that Sarah went through, we've really been inventorying the resources we have available in terms of mechanisms to do things in-house, contractual, and then additional contracts needed. So I do anticipate coming back for authority to expend funds through contracts to do the implementation. That will be part of it. The other part we're working on in-house and contracts that already exist.
Thank you so much. And are there any legal permissions? I'm thinking, permission to install something in the right-of-way outside of a permitting process that you believe will be needed? Is there anything in the codified ordinances that prevents you from implementing these plans that you're aware of?
At this point, no.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and I really appreciate you talking about the quick build. In my opinion, listen, love the idea of the Midway. It's lovely and great and all that kind of stuff. But in my opinion, we need safe infrastructure like quickly in many parts of the city. So I really appreciate the city's pivoting to quick build. And for folks that are listening, I want to draw a distinction. We're not talking about some of the stuff that's been done historically, the really cheap stuff that falls apart right away, but really kind of curbed, high quality, whether it's bump outs. And so the ones you showed in Little Italy, I go to Little Italy a lot. The pedestrian experience is much better. Having those bump outs there. I think the biggest component of those two is the line of sight. And I'll encourage folks, one of the projects in Ohio City that's really impactful was at 29th in Franklin. It's a road, I'm just explaining this for the process. It's a road that comes up to join Franklin, and the city bumped out the sides. It was a death trap. Before those bump outs went in, because you were coming up the hill, you couldn't see anything coming down Franklin Boulevard. So you kind of prayed as you turned onto Franklin from 29th. And now, as the city installed those curb I'm sorry, what's the term?
Those are daylighting.
Daylighting,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, my apologies. The daylighting, you can actually see now in a much better perspective, whether you're a pedestrian, vehicle, bike, whatever, the oncoming traffic. So that to me is a huge improvement. And that is not millions of dollars of investment, right? That is a rubber plastic curb and some delineators. But it made such a big difference at that corner. And to me, that is the type of work that can be done in every city neighborhood to improve the lives of people that live in our city. So I really appreciate, and I'm hearing it from you, so I'm not going to ask you if you're committed to quick build. It seems like you are. And it's just, to me, that a much more affordable approach to improve our street safety, the bump outs, the daylighting, all that kind of stuff is really, really great to see. And I hope, just one person's opinion, that we just stick to that. We don't need any $40 million road projects anymore for this stuff. Like, let's just get as many safe intersections across every neighborhood as possible. Like, to me, that's where we should be spending our money. So I appreciate that. And on that note, I kind of want to move into the conversation around speed tables, with the exception of one of Councilman Slife's residents. I'm hearing very positive feedback on these. The biggest challenge I'm facing, as Ms. Mersman knows, is my residents are saying, okay, but what about my street? We want one on my street now, right? So that's a good issue to have. But so to that question, Ms. Mersman, are we looking at ways to streamline the process to install speed tables specifically? And let me just put my cards on the table. You know, if there is a side street where it qualifies, right, and residents want it, and the council person wants it, and may even be able to pay for it, do we have to run all of the traffic studies and all that kind of stuff to implement it?
Thank you for the question. broadly, this plan and the speed table program specifically is really about creating systems and programs that we can roll out more easily and in a more streamlined fashion to get the changes out on the street faster. So we're really trying to shift all of our approaches from sort of one-off evaluations or requiring requests to come in, go through a process of sort of looking at those individually and creating programs and priorities that allow us to roll those things out on a very regular basis. This plan is helpful to the speed table and traffic calming conversation because it updates our perspective on our roadway network overall, thinking about which streets are suitable and good candidates for protected bike lanes, other traffic calming treatments, including speed tables. Traffic calming and speed tables are a big component of the neighborhood greenway network as well, thinking about neighborhood streets that we want to ensure are quiet and calm, low volume for folks to walk and bike to connect to other places across the city. So all of this feeds into this more comprehensive, planful, prioritized approach to the right-of-way. To your question about speed tables specifically, if council wishes to direct discretionary funds to streets that are residential local, yes, we will work with you to install speed tables without going through the data counts and sort of that quantified analysis. And we've already worked with a couple of council people to set up discretionary accounts to pull from as we're moving into the spring and summer.
I'm one of them.
Yes, you are one of them. And all of that to say, we also are doing routine counting. You know, the list is long because we are hearing very many requests from all over, but we're sort of chugging through those. We put counters out on a weekly basis, and so there is this systemic list making that is happening to roll speed tables out across the city as well.
Thank you. And I would encourage this body to think about as we go into the budget process, whether we want to put general fund dollars, if available, into traffic calming. I think that's something we need to discuss internally. And I appreciate that. I would say even for non-councilmatic dollars, is the city committed to looking at information outside of traffic numbers? Let me give you an example. 38th Street in my ward, it's not going to be the heaviest traffic volume, but I got a school, I got a park, I got a playground, I got a community garden, all critical things that I want to slow traffic because I got a ton of children over there. I got a senior center there. So it may not be the heaviest traffic street in the world, but I got a ton of vulnerable folks right around there that, to me, maybe the traffic data doesn't say, oh yeah, we got a ton of cars here, but I got a lot of other anecdotal data around it that would say, yeah, we want to calm the street. So can you explain that?
We definitely factor context and sort of destinations and populations into decisions. All of this is about prioritizing resources, which we all know are limited. We're here today because we want to work with council about where those priority areas are. And once we have those identified, we can look for external funding sources, figure out if it meets high priority criteria for citywide resources that we have right now. We can work with council discretionary funds. And this also connects to the glossary that Sarah mentioned online. What we're doing is building out a toolbox of treatments that can be used to address specific issues. I know speed tables are very high on people's minds because we had a rollout of that last summer. People saw them on their streets, they experienced them, they understand how they work. But there are many other things in the toolkit as well that we can work to implement. We're working with some council members on pulling CDBG funds into streets to enhance and supplement and address issues. So there are both a large variety of treatments that we can talk about to explore what you're hearing from residents, and then funding sources that we can match with those to roll them out as quickly as possible.
So if Councilman Bishop says, I am so sick and tired of people speeding on Street X, how does he go about advocating to your team to get speed tables or whatever other treatments on that street? Does he start with you, Ms. Mersman, or how should we engage on that?
Yes, I'm happy to be the intake person, and he knows well how to do that. We've been talking. It is helpful to copy Commissioner Mavic, especially around traffic engineering, traffic calming. If it's bicycle or pedestrian related, you can also copy Ms. Davis here.
Okay.
But reaching out to me, I'm happy to be the central point of contact. We'll set up a meeting. It's helpful if council members know sort of key areas of concern and can highlight those for us. We'll typically do some initial data collection, review crash reports. We can pull those very quickly and have an internal conversation about what might be possible that we can bring to council members. Say, here's our initial assessment, some ideas, and then we refine to get to a point of this is what we want to do where, how we're going to fund it, and then
Okay.
move forward.
And then the last question I have on speed tables, I'm hearing that the city's looking at prioritizing streets that are recently repaved, but sometimes those are not the streets where we need speed tables. So how do you negotiate that?
That's right. So you have a memo from me that sort of spells out these different pathways that we're working on setting up. We do not want, as you're saying, we don't want to use all of our speed table resources to put speed tables on all resurfaced streets. We know that some of those are already very low volume, very quiet. They had a lot of potholes, but maybe, only 20 people drive on them a day to access their driveways, where we know that there are streets with much more need. I am taking specific, so as council members are selecting their streets for resurfacing this year, you know those streets very well. If you would like to highlight some of them as ones that you think need speed tables, please let me know. We'll get those onto our list for 2025 as soon as possible. We can do data collection to affirm or to sort of tie break. But we worked with Public Works and our streets division to install speed tables. Those are also the folks that are doing the resurfacing. And so we're trying to get some economies and align those where it makes sense while not dumping all of our resources into that where it
Good.
doesn't make sense.
Happy to hear that.
But there's a detailed memo that you'll have from me, you do have from me from late 2024 that lays out that entire
Okay, if you could
process.
resend that too, I'd appreciate
Sure.
that. All right, just a couple more questions, I'll move on. Appreciate the committee's indulgence here. So just, where are we at with parking buffered bike lanes? So for the viewing public, that is a system where you got a car parked, a buffer, and then a bike lane. So it still allows you to have parking on the street for businesses or whatever. And then it also provides a buffered bike lane for safe cycle use. So have we accepted that as a policy at the City of Cleveland? Are we planning on implementing that here locally? So I'm looking for a yes or no on both those questions.
Yes, we are planning to install our first protected bike lane this summer on Payne Avenue.
Okay.
And we'll also be installing separated bike lanes on a section of Huron and Prospect downtown.
So yes and yes. Okay, great. Raised crosswalks, same question.
Same answer.
Same answer. Great. Love it. Love these quick. And I'll just say the roundabouts, I know they take time for folks to get used to, but I walk Franklin Boulevard every single day of my life. The difference between before those roundabouts went in until and after is day and night. We had Fulton and Franklin, that intersection 28th and Franklin was a disaster. Car crashes all the time, people jockeying to get around each other, totally different. So I get that it takes time to get used to, but I can tell you as a resident that lives abutting one of those streets, is day and night. It is day and night. So I just want to put that out into the world. Okay, the last question I have, and then I'm going to move to Councilman Slife. Our traffic engineer. So this was a position, I think it's one of the most important positions in the city of Cleveland because it directly impacts road design, which residents really care about because of speeding cars and safety and crashes. I understand that that position has been open or was recently open. It's critical that that position is a person who understands everything that you all care about. Where are we at on hiring that person?
We would love if anyone listening is interested in applying to
So it's
throw
still
their
open?
hat into the ring.
Okay, it's still open? Is that the
Yes,
answer?
it is still open. This plan is really important to setting the tone for the work that we'll be doing over the next several years, as well as just keeping the city running day in and day out.
Yep.
It's a huge job. We are looking for the right person and would love applicants to consider.
I appreciate that, and I will just say again, that position is so important because if you all do all this hard work and you have someone in that position that says thanks but no thanks, then it's all in vain. So we need a traffic engineer in the city of Cleveland who understands that people walk in our city, bike in our city, roll in our city, and it's not just a city full of vehicles and flying hoverboards with no human beings engaging in the street level, which is historically what our traffic engineers have been like. And I can say that because I don't really care. So I appreciate that that is a major component of hiring that position, someone who can look holistically at our roads. Councilman Slife.
Okay, thank you. Sort of in no particular order, and yes, as Councilman McCormick indicated, I have been getting a lot of outreach about speed tables. A critique of speed tables that I have gotten that I think is fair is about signage and painting, and I've said this, but I'll say it again and make the request again. There are people who have indicated that sometimes the signs, the advanced warning signs, are on the left side of the roads. Maybe they're not looking for it. Sometimes if cars are parked, the right side of it is painted, but you can't see it because cars are blocking it. To be able to paint both sides of it. Advanced painting like Lakewood does, where it sort of flares up to the speed table so that you can see it. I think all of those are reasonable requests to help improve signage. Obviously, we are hoping that people will choose to drive below 25 miles an hour on our 25-mile-an-hour streets, but if someone's going 24 and hits one of these because maybe there was an opportunity for us to improve visibility, we're certainly not trying to damage vehicles. So as supportive as I am of the speed tables, I do think that there are ways that we could increase signage, and because if you're not used to being on that street, it could be a learning curve. So I don't know, you can respond if you'd like, but it's a pretty cut and dry request.
Would you like to respond to that, Ms. Mersman?
I'm happy to respond. Noted. And since our initial rollout last summer, we have been going back through and addressing some of those additional signage and striping needs.
Yeah, thank you. And I've explained to residents that this is not road paint season. So that just because it hasn't happened immediately doesn't mean it couldn't be in the hopper.
If I can also tack onto that through the chair of the councilman, like I think that's what you're highlighting sometimes with these different treatments. Like we've got the main principle, right? Like with the roundabouts, they're annoying as hell and cause you to make a slower decision. The crosswalks, though, could maybe be tweaked on those roundabouts to align with certain dimensions on the roadway, too. So I think that's kind of like our iterations moving forward with this.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you to Bike Cleveland for being here, and and I agree with the focus on quick wins. As much as I think it's a fair request that members of this body, advocate. I will say, and this is a little bit of my soapbox, but I tend to think that the City Hall has a history of trying to over-engineer quick wins and essentially throw quick wins out the window. And I'll again say, I think the sidewalk through most of Ward 17 on Lorraine Avenue is sufficient for the width of an off-road bike path. I've been told by engineers that it's not wide enough. It's 7 feet instead of being 8 feet. Correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, that's an example of us overthinking it when we could just stripe down and encourage people to use what is essentially an off-road bike path, but it hasn't seemed to catch any interest, and bluntly, that section of west of West 117th, I don't think Lorraine has been a priority. There's a lot of focus on Lorraine in town, like closer to downtown, the bikeway, the county planning has this whole Lorraine Road initiative, Fairview Park, North Olmsted, and lying in the middle of it is wards 16, 17, part of Ward 11, where I feel like we're just getting lost in the mix, and there is a lot of opportunity there. So that's an example of my quick win, but to me, I think we're overthinking it if we just don't go out and do it. And quite frankly, also the volumes of people using it immediately would not be such that I'd be concerned that there'd be issues if it's not built perfectly to design, but we get lost in design best practices instead of just doing stuff that I think we could do. So that's my request as we talk about quick wins.
Would you like a response to that, Councilman?
No, if you'd like.
It's up to you. It's your time.
It's my request. Something that I would like to discuss more is sort of the elephant in the room of sidewalks. And nowhere in these analyses are, we are fortunate in Cleveland to sidewalks are more or less prolific in Cleveland, and that's not the case in many major cities in the country. And I think that try as we may, and I'm a big supporter of the greenways. We have West Park Greenway signage, but still, if I'm riding to the park with my kids, we're on the sidewalk of Montrose Avenue. We're not on the street, even though it's a pretty quiet street. I know that it's a bit of blasphemy to suggest that bikes are on the sidewalk, but I even think that there's main roads where it could be appropriate. And I guess something I would ask, has it ever been considered? Have we gone through an analysis of places where we know, we don't want bikes on West 25th, going past the West Side Market? There's too many pedestrians. So that's an area where if we are trying to encourage bike riders that we really need to have bike intentional facilities because there would be a conflict. But in other parts of the city, on Puritas, there's not such a conflict. The pedestrian traffic is not so heavy. So have we looked at places where we know that based on pedestrian traffic on sidewalks, we know that we want to definitely discourage bikes from being there versus places where we know it's not ideal, we know it's not preferred by many bikers, but it's sort of a situation where we might kind of look the other way because it's not creating any, it's actually, in my opinion, safer than trying to create a bike facility as a quick win.
Ms. Mersman?
To the councilman through the chair, our current ordinances and traffic laws already sort of address that from an ordinance perspective, which also, Chair, gets to your initial question about needing to change any more legal structures around what we're trying to do. So currently in Cleveland, you may ride on the sidewalk outside of business districts, but within business districts, you should not be riding your bike on the sidewalk. And you'll see that many of our recommendations and the projects that we've been talking about sort of echo that. We are looking at more dedicated, separated bike facilities on our main arteries that are through business districts, whereas in the residential areas, there's much less in terms of robust, dedicated, physically separated infrastructure because the streets are calmer, they're lower volume, and sidewalks are available for riding.
Sure, so thank you. Is business district, is that defined or is it just basically determined by zoning? Is there like a separate, is there an instance where a business, a property could be, an area could be local retail, but it's not defined as a business district?
I will look to Mr. Davenport to talk about zoning. There is a definition of business district in the traffic code as well that deals with the number of feet of frontage along a particular street that is in operation as business.
Through the chair.
Mr. Davenport?
Through the chair of the councilman, yes, I think it is like a distance and aggregate requirement. So you can't just have two buildings on an intersection that are zoned general retail and call it a business district. It needs to be, I think, like, there's some distance we could send you. I think it's probably 100 or 250. Those are the standard dimensions in our zoning code that relate to kind of these numbers.
Yeah. And I hear myself coming off as adversarial, so I hope everybody knows that I'm like a big bike rider. But I guess the maybe the absurdity is not a fair way to characterize it, but we don't want bikes on the sidewalk, so we want bikes in the street, but that's not safe, so we're going to create an off-road bike path through a business district. Is that just not a sidewalk? Like, it seems like we're almost arguing against ourselves. So I want to explore if there's areas that don't neatly fit within that dichotomy, where it is a business district where we can kind of use existing infrastructure and know kind of on the ground our common law analysis that this isn't comparable to saying ride your bike down the sidewalk on Euclid Avenue during lunch hour. Like, that is, I think that there are places in the city, especially since we have a lot of business districts that are struggling, or there's the vacancy of buildings where it might meet that legal definition, but it's not meeting the concern that we're trying to cut against.
Through the chair to the council person, I also just wanted to highlight one of the things that we're really, I guess, emphasizing with this whole work is, like, there is a benefit for people riding bicycles, but also the additional benefit is the narrowing of the road. So yes, we can allow, like, bicycles are allowed on sidewalks, but we're also trying to serve this additional need of most of our traffic fatalities being drivers in cars or
Sure.
people in cars.
And that's fair, and I'm not against that. I'm also trying to meet the need of, if people are wanting their kids to ride their bikes to schools, they're probably going to say stay on the sidewalk. So do we just need to kind of acknowledge that as a factor within all of this? Which kind of gets me into my last question. Do we have any data, I know it wouldn't be scientific, on bike ownership in Cleveland? I guess we've focused so much on people don't want to ride their bike because it's not safe, but I've never really heard anyone ask the question, like, are kids not riding their bikes to school because it's not safe, or are kids not riding their bikes to school because they don't have bikes? And are we, like, if we're trying to create the amenity, do we also need to be talking about how we can connect households that don't have a car or have transportation challenges, or there's many people having to share, like, do they need bikes and they just don't have them, may be unable to afford one, and we need to be doing something to make connections between people in this mode of transportation?
To the councilman through the chair, I'd like to address a couple of the different things that you laid out.
Sure.
First, going back to your questions about riding on the sidewalk, there certainly is an age element to that, and a grade school kid riding on the sidewalk is very different than, having that as the preferred bike facility for everyone on bikes moving through that area. I do think, we talk about sidewalk level bike facilities, and we're working on installing them in some places. And to your point, that doesn't always have to be an extremely long-term and expensive capital project to do that. I think what's really essential is communicating, signing, marking, so that if a pedestrian is in that area, they know to expect a bicyclist if that's what we're encouraging in that area. So it's really a lot of, which I think is what you're saying, in locations like Lorraine, where maybe the sidewalk is wide enough to accommodate both bikes and people on foot, that the bike riders know to watch out for people on foot, and people walking know to expect bike riders. And so it is an endorsed bicycle facility with that thought put in so that users know how to interact with it. To the question of bike ownership, when I was with the school district working through Safe Routes to School, we did do surveys of parents and then also talked a lot with students. One of the main challenges, many of the kids have bicycles. They don't always necessarily have a safe and secure way or place to store them at school. And so we heard from kids that would stash their bike in the bushes, or some of our buildings had interior courtyards where the principal would let them bring them in. We tried to focus on giving away bike locks, setting up racks. That storage element and the security of bikes is really key. But yes, all of those programmatic things are definitely impactful. And as we're thinking about on-street infrastructure, we're also working through the zoning code to require secure bicycle parking inside where there are long-term storage needs, outside in terms of bike racks. We have been applying for grants in partnership with partners like Bike Cleveland for e-bike rebates to make bicycle ownership and e-bike ownership, especially with that longer distance range, more accessible to Clevelanders. So all of those are things in play and part of the overall environment.
Sure, thank you. I'd love, and if to the degree we could, it'd be interesting to kind of expand that sort of analysis beyond children and into kind of the adult population, and who would benefit from a bike but doesn't have one, and how do we find locks and all those things? Because I'm sure that there's a lot of adults who maybe that are unable to get the jobs and things like that, but would benefit from having access to a bike. So.
Through the chair to the council person, I would also just reference, we did polling in collaboration with City Thread, Baldwin Wallace, and Bike Cleveland in 2023, and it was representative polling, and I believe one of the questions asked on there was do you own a bicycle? So obviously that's a sample size of a certain number, but that is one of the links that I can include in my follow-up information, and I'll highlight that if it's included.
Thank you, Councilman Slife. Appreciate that great line of questioning. Next on my list is Councilman Brian Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, to our presenters, what is the most dangerous intersection in the city of Cleveland? And then if you could break that down to east side, west side, and south side.
Sure. We have a list that we can share. The majority of them it's ranked and it changes annually. Big ones are East 93rd and Kinsman, several along East 105th Street. We have bigger streets on the east side. In general, our bigger streets, especially with lower traffic volumes, result in faster speeds, more severe crashes. So there's sort of this pattern that we see. And so when we look at our Vision Zero network as well as intersections, there are more on the east side than on the west side. Happy to get you a list. ODOT has a program that identifies most dangerous intersections and does safety studies on those. So we're also integrating that into our process for analyzing and improving. Happy to go into more detail.
No, if you could just get us the list. I don't know if it's accumulated over the last 5 years or whatever. Just so that we know. It doesn't have to be in order, but we'll just say the most dangerous intersections in the city of Cleveland. Just to piggyback a little bit off of what Councilman Slife was saying, has there ever been a traffic study done on how many vehicles come through the city a day compared to how many bicyclists are coming through the city a day? And then the third one would be, and how many people are using public transportation throughout the city on a given day?
To the councilman through the chair, we have data that points in that direction. There has never been a comprehensive, like, 1-week survey to count all of those things. So the data resources we have at our disposal, one is a subscription through ODOT to a service called Streetlight Insight that aggregates cell phone location data, de-identified. They have a software that basically can make a best guess as to whether you're walking, biking, driving on transit, and then it also sort of knows generally where your home is and so you can do some origin and destination
Well, that's scary.
comparisons. It's all aggregated and de-identified, but it can be very helpful in understanding large trends, like where are folks coming into the city from generally and how. So that's helpful on a larger scale. NOACA does bike counts twice a year at key points. So we have some of that perspective in terms of bike counts in May and September. We also have a couple of 24/7 traffic cameras on a couple of intersections, I think 7 to 9 citywide, that are doing bicycle, pedestrian, and vehicular counts and turning movements at those key intersections. And then we have survey data like from the Census American Community Survey that has commute mode. So it's a patchwork. You mentioned transit. RTA has automatic people counters on their buses, and so we do have ridership in that way as well. But
Yeah,
it's very
ju-
hard to
just-
track,
just
like,
the information.
number
I
of
mean,
people.
If we're looking at, transforming, our city to be more bicycle and pedestrian friendly, right? I think we should know, no, I'm not even saying pros and cons, because I'm not against this, so don't get me wrong. But, I mean, if we have an intersection where there's 5,000 cars going through a day, but 2 bicyclists, how do we offset that to make sure that we're safe but don't disrupt the pattern of 5,000 vehicles trying to get through? You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's not, again, I'm not against this, so don't go there and don't stick Bike Cleveland on me, like has happened in the past, because I appreciate Bike Cleveland and Jenna and everything else. So that's not it. But I just want to make sure that we're not overdoing it.
Sure.
Do you know? Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying?
A couple of additional perspectives to add from that outlook. First, when we are making changes, often there are traffic counts taken at a specific intersection or along a corridor to inform what type of treatment or reduced capacity is best for that specific scenario. In many cases, our roadway capacity is way higher than it needs to be for the traffic that is using it on a daily basis. We've all, I think, heard a lot about the Superior Midway project recently that went through extensive traffic counts, and a lot of that data goes into the design. What we found through that is that street daily, about only a quarter of the roadway capacity that exists is actually utilized. And so we do have generally quite a lot of opportunity to repurpose roadway space without significantly impacting vehicular convenience. Also, we do detailed data collection around that. The other thing I would say in terms of interest is Sarah mentioned the Bike Cleveland polling through Baldwin Wallace, which is statistically significant in terms of residents' interest in doing this. She mentioned that we hear in engagement that a lot of folks are interested in biking and walking more, but don't feel that option exists for them in a safe and convenient way now. And so we are grounding our strategies on what people are telling us they want and the statistically significant direction that we're getting from residents in terms of the transformation they want to see in the roadway.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I just think the more data we could have, would be easier. I want to go back to speed tables. So I saw in here that you said council discretionary funds, right, could help move this along. And one of the things is speed tables. Mr. Chairman, to our presenters, what's the cost of a speed table?
So this is also in the speed table memo that I'll recirculate. After last summer, when we installed over 100 in-house, the average cost is around $3,500 per table for us to do in-house. We have limited capacity to do that, which is why we're at that 100 per cycle sort of threshold. I mentioned the concrete requirements contract that MOCAP currently holds. The line item cost for a speed table with markings and signage in that current contract is around $8,000 per table. And so what we have articulated is putting together a list of specific speed table locations that we will bid out separately in the hopes of adding to the capacity that we can do in-house at a better price point that is lower than that $8,000. My understanding from talking with Commissioner Scott and our Public Works leadership is the more clarity and certainty that we can give to contractors about what we're asking them to deliver, the more specific they can be on their cost to us. You know, we're limiting their uncertainty and risk, and so that's the avenue that we're going to both continue to use our in-house capacity and expertise to roll them out as much as we can, and then layer on with private forces.
And Mr. Chairman, to the you're a senior strategist, right?
Sure.
To our senior strategist, why do we only have that capacity? What's limiting us to the fact that we can only do so many? I mean, is it lack of employees? Is it materials? What's holding us back in-house? Like you said, in-house, because it's a lot less expensive to do it in-house. What's holding us back to be able to do more?
So we are currently in a learning process around this, right? We piloted speed tables at 10 locations across the city, took the learnings from that. Last summer was our first year rolling them out citywide using in-house forces. And those forces are also crews that are responsible for all of the asphalt work happening on our streets in-house, so pothole filling, resurfacing,
So it's
et
streets
cetera.
that does it?
So yes, it's through
Okay.
through forces in the Division of Streets. Commissioner Scott and his crews and the crew leaders he have been incredible partners in figuring this out and adding this to the city's portfolio. It's a growing process for us, right? So we are setting this program up. We are expanding it as possible, and the future, I think, only holds potential for additional expansion if that's the direction we want to go. But we're growing our internal learnings. We're understanding better what type of equipment and staffing we need to scale up, and then that can be factored into future years.
Okay. And then just to kind of reiterate conversations that I've had with some of my colleagues regarding the data, I think if residents want it, council members are okay with it, you know, with funds or whatever, just do it, right? I mean, I don't think we should need, you know, a year's worth of data to collecting. I think if the residents on the street who live on the street want it, right, we should just put it in. Okay, that's just my opinion, but
To the councilman through the chair, just on that point, I don't philosophically disagree with you. We are at a point, though, where we have more demand and more desire than we can reasonably address immediately. And so the data is very important in terms of prioritizing need and helping address areas that are highest need first. So it's more of an potential for us to include equity and need into the conversation as well, understanding the magnitude of desire and interest. That's
right, Mr. Chairman, to our senior strategist, I agree with that, but like you said, there's a bigger need or a bigger demand than what you can keep up with, which means people want them, so just,
Yeah.
especially side streets, right? Especially the side streets. One last thing, Mr. Chairman, to our senior strategist, is somebody who's had his bike stolen two to three times and doesn't like to shop big box. You don't have to plug it here, but if you could just send us information on where residents can get bicycles that they're not paying $900 and $1,000 for at the big box stores or whatever. You know, if there's local places that rehab bikes or whatever, if you could send us those places. I know I probably get 2 or 3 asks a year. Hey, do you know where I can get a used bike? I don't even know what that would be, a used bicycle shop or something. I have no idea where it is. So if you could just send us information on, you know, those resources that are throughout the city, that'd be very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Ms. Mersman, do we have those resources? And also looking at Ms. Thomas.
Thank you. I was going to say that's a perfect request for Bike Cleveland. We're lucky to have several resources citywide. I think they would be the best to provide a list for you.
So Ms. Thomas, if you could connect with Ibukan over here for that information and whatever resources Bike Cleveland has on affordable bike ownership, please. Thank you so much. Okay, Councilwoman Jasmine Santana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and many of my questions were asked, so I will be brief. Through the chair to Callie, Sarah, I just want to thank you guys for your passion, your great work around just keeping our residents safe in the traffic. And you attended, Sarah, one of my community meetings, and at first when I announced it, people were just kind of like, "Oh, this is going to be boring." She was so much fun. Like, she had everyone in that community meeting engaged. So I'm open to hosting another one. So. Quick question. I want to go back to that number, 75 fatalities. Do we know the reasons that led to those fatalities in our city? Speeding,
a great question.
DUI.
Yeah, so we have a breakdown of our crashes that we can share with you. Generally, a lot of our crashes are like roadway departure and like fixed object. So it is a lot of people that are speeding, they lose control in some way, whether they're under the influence or not, and hitting like a fixed object. So that's a lot of what we see in Cleveland. There are other types of crashes that will be that show up as common, but that's the biggest one that we see in Cleveland.
Got it. Thank you. And do you have data broken down maybe by districts? For instance, the reason I'm asking Scranton, right? I think there's been about 3 fatalities in that. I don't know if it was due to DUI or speeding, but we haven't prioritized Scranton Avenue. And so when there's several fatalities in certain areas or corridors, what are we doing to expedite whatever plan that is in place for that area?
Yes, we can talk with you about specific locations in your ward, and we'll share out some citywide analysis as well as a map we can create that shows fatalities and serious injuries, which are the real key interactions that we focus on through Vision Zero. I'll also tip my hat to Jenna and Bike Cleveland. They do a bicycle and pedestrian crash analysis. This will be the second year. I believe Jenna's working on 2024 reporting right now that breaks it up by ward. And so you'll have that additional insight into bicycle and pedestrian crashes specifically. We are in the final stages of hiring a Vision Zero coordinator here at the city to work in the Office of Capital Projects to keep a very close look on those trends and then incorporate safety enhancements into both our capital projects as well as this systematic safety improvement that we've been talking about here today. That's a really key capacity add following on our Vision Zero action plan that we adopted in 2022. So I guess to summarize, happy to talk with you about more specific data. As well, we'll be having a new colleague to join us here next time to talk about specifically safety concerns and what we're doing about that.
Got it. Thank you, Callie, for that. And then the next question is, like, of course, all my residents want, right, the speed tables. But where's the line between traffic enforcement and installing, traffic improvement? I mean, has that stopped that our numbers have increased with speeding? I mean, like, what has happened in the past few years that the fatalities have increased, speeding has increased, this has become a priority, this is like my top 3 calls in my office. What has happened in the past few years? And I'm sure you're probably going to say COVID.
Yeah, you can just
but
leave your
I'm
mics
saying-
on, honestly.
Yeah.
So there was a national trend. Basically, when the pandemic hit, there were less cars on the street, so almost every street was under capacity. And so then there is that, like, you feel less need to follow the speed limit, follow the rules. There's no traffic. So there was just this national trend where we saw speeding, dangerous driving increase. Even though less people were driving, we still saw fatalities increase. And then when people came back on the roads, as people went back to work in person, we didn't see that go back down. In some places, it started to fall. Cleveland is not in that group. We've continued to increase. To your point about enforcement and the speed tables, when I worked for the city of Boston, we were rolling out a citywide speed hump program, and we basically were installing them on every single neighborhood street where it wasn't like too steep of a hill. And we would call them 24/7 traffic enforcement because they're self-enforcing, and so you don't need a police officer to be there. So that was like kind of the way that we were thinking about it there. I don't know if you have more you want to say about enforcement.
We are coordinating with Cleveland Police on especially contributing factors leading to fatal and serious injury crashes, sharing locations that we know are hotspots from a Vision Zero perspective. Just to underscore what Sarah said, these aren't mutually exclusive. The idea is that they're mutually reinforcing, and so that we're designing for the behavior that we want on our streets. We're partnering with enforcement to reinforce that. But, we know that police can't be everywhere all the time, and there are some things that police must do that street design cannot do. And so we're layering strategies in the aim of being as effective and impactful as possible.
Got it. Thank you. And then my last question, just out of curiosity. Let's say funding was not a challenge, right? And you had access to funding. How much would it take for you to make our city safe? And how much is this plan going to cost? And how many years is it going to take for our city to be safe?
That's a wonderful question. That's a more than $1 million question. So as Sarah talked about, for the bikeway build-out, we're specifically focused on a 3-year rapid implementation strategy. We haven't set that in stone yet. We're really wanting the feedback from this round of community engagement to finalize what that vision is and what we can achieve within 3 years. That strategy will include capital projects that are already underway and scheduled to come online in the next 3 years, including Superior Midway, resurfacings like Wade Park, Payne Avenue, those types of projects. We're also looking at neighborhood greenways and bike lane upgrades, as Sarah walked us through. So I don't want to say a dollar number right here today, but that is an important piece of the final plan recommendations and right-sizing what we can do in terms of need with the capital that we have available.
Got it. Thank you. Well, thank you all of you, for your work in keeping our residents safe.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Kevin Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. Mr. Chairman, you eloquently stated in your line of questioning a lot of things that I was going to say. So anyway, I just want to reiterate what things that you said, that this is important measures in our city, and our past administrations had not prioritized these measures the way that we have here in the last few years. So I think that we are behind the 8 ball. And we need to really get moving on some of these issues for our residents, because I'm going to tell you this, I've spent quite a bit of time in New York City. I spent quite a bit of time in downtown Chicago. I spent quite a bit of time in Washington, D.C. And believe it or not, with the volume of traffic that they have compared to Cleveland, I feel as a pedestrian much, much safer in those cities than I do in the city of Cleveland. And I think it's the culture. I think it's a culture that that the drivers in those cities look out for pedestrians, and they are trained, so to speak, with traffic measures that keep our city safe. So I want to applaud you guys and your efforts to make Cleveland safe. One thing I do want to request is that I want to request, how much have we spent on speed tables thus far in the city of Cleveland? I want to get a snapshot about how much we spent so far and how much we plan on spending. And I also want to reiterate what Councilman Santana said about you have talked about your focus groups. You've talked about coming to this body. I think it needs to be a priority to engage our safety forces and the importance of pedestrian and bicycle safety in the city of Cleveland, and put it on their radar, because the past administrations have not communicated that to our safety forces. So I think we need to start here and now communicating with our safety forces about the importance of safety in our community. Okay, and just another thing you said, Chairman, is that I'm prioritizing pedestrian safety and traffic calming measures in my ward with discretionary dollars, and we have a meeting coming up. So I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having them here to discuss this important matter. I want to thank you, Callie, also. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman, for those great comments. Really appreciate that feedback. And if you could get that data the Councilman requested around speed table, and again, to Ms. Odie Martins on our staff here today. So thank you. Okay, Councilwoman Gray.
Okay, thank you, Chair. First, I want to say thank you for the great questions, and some of the questions I have was similar to the colleagues have asked, but I just have an additional few more. First thing I want to say is, Ms. Messerman, thank you for coming to our community meeting last year. It was a great inspiration that the residents really enjoyed what you communicated. I mean, that was the first thing that inspired them to understanding what traffic calming was all about and what your position was all about. And due to that, they have a better understanding of what the speed tables, how the speed tables are administrated, throughout the community. And they are now patient, because now they are more patient to understand how, how that works. So even though I still email you and Commissioner Maverick, all the requests, but I'm thankful for that. But also, you left all that great literature, and I am still distributing that literature out to the residents throughout the community. So I'll say, we appreciate your time and effort, that you gave to us at that committee meeting last year. But to that, the first question I have here in the presentation, it says, what tools are in our toolkit? The one that states traffic signal changes. I want to refer to the one you have signal, signal progression. What does that, relates to?
Great question. Through the chair to the councilperson. So a good example of this is on Clifton Avenue on the west side, which has very directional traffic volumes. Like people are commuting in the morning and they're commuting out in the evening. So even though the speed limit for that street is 35, the signals are actually timed that if you're going, I think it's 26 or 27 miles per hour, you will hit green lights the whole time. So we can encourage safer driving speeds even in places where we don't have as much control over the speed limit due to the state. And so people are incentivized to follow those speeds. We can complement that with signage that says like traffic signals timed for a certain speed. On some of our priority biking routes, we can also prioritize signals that turn green for the speed of a person biking. So they call it a green wave. So it's somewhere between 10 and 15 miles per hour is what that would be signals. So it's thinking about, especially on these streets where there's very directional travel, in the morning, it's time for people going inbound. In the evening, it's time for people going outbound or things like that. So just like thinking about the signals as a system and how we can use them to incentivize these good behaviors from drivers that we want to see.
Okay, good question, because I want to direct this to, if I can call you Callie, I always call you Callie anyway.
Please, that's my name. You're welcome to call me that.
Thank you. What's your name, sorry, again? Sarah. By Sarah stating that the signal that we have on East 119th and Kisman, I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but I know Commissioner Maverick is. Due to what she just explained about the timing of the is that the traffic light. We have a traffic light on East 119th and Kisman that times the traffic and the crosswalk. No one crosses on that crosswalk anymore because it was designated back, I'm thinking 2000. At that time, Commissioner Maverick stated that because there was churches in that area. And it was designated for a traffic, for that crosswalk, to signal the traffic light. When you step on the white line as you cross the street, then the green light turns red. No one crosses that cross light at all anymore because they fear of the traffic driving fast in that area down Kinsmer. So they're not aware that crosswalk signifies the traffic light. And the traffic is always going through that green light all day long, 24 hours a day. So people in their mind thinking, as my colleague McCormick stated earlier, because of speeding traffic, people are afraid to cross the street. And due to that, people do not cross on that crosswalk due to the fast traffic, and that light always green, and they can understand why. But Commissioner Maverick said it was structured that way back in the early 2000s because of the churches in that area, and they was using that crosswalk, quite a bit. Now no one uses it, so could we have something adjusted to that particular traffic light on East 119th and Kinsman?
To the councilwoman through the chair, thank you for bringing up this example. We'll leave here and follow up with Commissioner Mavic about what's possible. I will say that Kinsman Avenue in general is one of the red lines on the map.
Yes.
We know that there are very high traffic volumes, high speeds, and so that is one corridor that we'll be very interested in working with you on for changes over the next 3 years, from traffic signals to striping to other improvements. So thank you for raising that. We'll follow up with that specific intersection, but also look forward to continuing to work with you on the corridor in general.
Yes, thank you. And then I have another question pertaining to the timing of the traffic lights, and what I just stated on that. Now, a lot of constituents believe that the timing of the traffic lights cause accidents. But we know to a certain degree it doesn't. Because they don't understand that they think when the light turns yellow, then one side the light is yellow, the other side the light is red. They think the timing is off, but it's not. So could that kind of be communicated in a sense for them to understand that traffic lights are not timed, they're timed to stop traffic and not to cause an accident, per se, if I'm asking that question clearly?
Sure, and if there's an opportunity for us to come to an upcoming community meeting and you want us to talk about different strategies around traffic signal timing and how we can use traffic signals as a tool for safer streets, we can talk in detail about many of these strategies and sort of explain and answer residents' questions.
Okay, thank you. And I think I have one more. I think it's something that Councilman McCormick asked earlier about when the streets are resurfaced. When the streets are resurfaced, some of the residents think that that we also need a speed table on a resurfaced street, because once the streets are resurfaced, they're almost like a speedway. The cars speed up and down the street because it's so smooth and soft. So to that question he asked earlier, could you just reiterate that speed tables are not to be put on resurfaced streets, per se?
We want to work with you to determine which resurfaced streets would be priority for speed tables. So we do want to calm traffic on resurfaced streets where that is warranted and necessary, but we also understand that it doesn't make sense to do that on every single resurfaced street. So we're looking for council guidance and input to help us know from your perspective and your residents' perspective which streets you think should be priority. We can also assist with that in terms of data collection if helpful, but that should be a conversation happy to have with you about where speed tables from your perspective would be ideal.
Okay, all right. I think, one more question. I was just want to say this. On the west side, as Councilman McCormick in Ohio City, I love Franklin Boulevard. All the roundabouts. I mean, I just love driving up, down that street. Sometimes I just go over there and just drive around from one end to the next. I mean, it's such a smooth and safe area. And I noticed that drivers respect the roundabouts. They take the time. They respect going east to west or north to south. I noticed that when I do go over there, it's just everybody is just in like in rhythm with that. And I know it was discussed before that that was like the area that it was like a proposed area just to do that area first, the west side, just to see how it operates, which it does. And I think Commissioner Merrick has spoken, chair to the team that had spoken to the fact that streets has to be widened more. And we don't have as many roundabouts on the east side. Maybe a few in the larger intersections per se, like the streets and roads, but not the intersection of the community. And I was wondering, due to not only talking about speed tables, which we know every street may not get a speed table, and every resident, would like to have that per se. Even the short streets want a speed table from like one block to the next because of the speeding. But how can that be looked at, that survey be looked at more on the east side to get roundabouts similar to what Franklin has? Chair to Kelly.
Great question. Ms.
To the
Mertzman?
councilwoman through the chair, you're right that Franklin was a pilot project, sort of the first of its kind in the city for the mini roundabouts that fit within the existing footprint of the intersection, which is different, as you said, to the modern roundabouts that are like Farringdon and East 116th, Fulton and Franklin. So we tried it, and this is to Adam's point that he made as well. We're really trying new things on our roadways you've seen over the last handful of years, and then pulling those into the toolkit. So these mini roundabouts are an example of the things that are being pulled into the toolkit after the successful pilot. We're in the process of doing a formal post-project evaluation right now on Franklin, and are, like you, very interested in implementing similar treatments in other intersections citywide. So this is another opportunity where we would love to talk with you about locations where you're specifically interested in that treatment in your ward, and are happy to look at that as a safety and traffic calming enhancement that we feel has worked really well in the pilot.
Okay, thank you for that. And one more question. I know I had spoken to you about a lot of the residents on the east side. When you chair to the committee, when the department come out and measure the speed tables, and when you put down maybe 3 speed tables throughout intersection, as you had that question on East 123rd Street. Remember, the resident wanted that speed table from in front of her house because they're elders, and every time a car go over the bump, they could hear the sound. And they wanted that speed table to be moved a little further up in another section, where another resident wanted that speed table to be put in front of her area on 123rd. So those questions are still coming up because of the elders. They stay at home, they more visual, and they are the eyes and ears of the community per se. So they hear and see everything, and that noise annoys them when the cars are speeding and they don't slow down for the speed table. You can hear that bumper. So, but saying that, when you measure out the speed tables, like 3 speed tables in that intersection, and how is that measured out? Because by the elder wanted that to be moved, and the other elder wanted that speed table to be moved in front of her area, and you had to calculate that, and you had to come back and say that we're not able to move those speed tables like that. Could you tell me, the reason why too, they're concerned?
Sure. So when we place the speed tables specifically, there are sort of 2 layers of analysis that go into the locations where they are. The first one is looking at the overall street grid, the block lengths, and the distance between traffic signals or stop signs. We want these to be placed at a regular cadence, so folks are not incentivized to hit the brakes, hit the gas, right? We want them to just go at a slow, safe speed along the entirety of the street. So when we're placing them, we try and place them not right up on an intersection, but within a couple 100 feet of an intersection, and then spaced between 400 and 600 feet apart for that regular cadence. Then the second phase, so that's, I did that work personally last summer. That's the general analysis that we're looking at from like Google Maps, desktop analysis. And then those specific recommended locations go out to a field crew that does a site survey before they install it. They're looking at things like where are driveways spaced. We try and put them in places where people can pull in and out of their driveways without hitting the speed table. We don't want to put them right in front of a driveway, obviously. Sometimes there are considerations around manholes in the street or other things that they need to be shifted a little bit in one direction or another. So those are the considerations and the balance that we're trying. We're really aiming toward maximum traffic calming effectiveness with the spacing, and then there are logistical or like spatial constraints that we have to take into account.
Okay, thank you. So good answers, thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman, for those great questions. Appreciate that. All right, I really appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you so much, Ms.
Thank you for
Mersman
having
and your
us.
team, for this great update. Ms. Thomas from, I think, left from by Cleveland as well. Appreciate her being here today. And please follow up with those requests to our team here for that additional information. But again, really appreciate this work. I don't need to tell anyone at this table how high of a priority this is for our residents. So I appreciate your dedication and your diligence to getting this done. Thanks so much. Madam Clerk, with that, this Transportation and Mobility Committee is adjourned.
Our parent ambassadors.
So this is the electronic grade book where parents can see grades, attendance, and anything else that their child's up to. Again, if people want to sign up or want more information, where can they go?
Well, they can go to our website, clevelandmetroschools.org, and there is a